It was late 2020. The world outside still felt like a fragile, broken thing, humming with an undercurrent of collective anxiety. My retail job had vanished like smoke, leaving me scrambling for any income. Uber seemed like the only lifeline. Working nights, you see things, hear things. Not just the usual drunken confessions or awkward silences, but the whispers of the city's hidden pulse. Nothing, however, prepared me for that Friday in October. The air was already biting, hinting at the deep chill of winter. It was just past midnight. I'd dropped off a high roller at a minimalist concrete hotel on the city's edge, a place that felt more like a fortress than a sanctuary. The streetlights here were sparse, swallowed by the encroaching darkness of the unkempt outskirts. My phone chimed with a new request almost immediately. The pickup was about 6 minutes away at an old, abandoned-looking bowling alley attached to a forgotten strip mall, the kind of place you'd expect to see tumbleweeds rolling through. The name on the app was Derek. I accepted, a strange prickle of unease already starting to form. When I pulled up, the silence was oppressive. It wasn't just quiet, it was a void of sound, broken only by the low hum of my engine. A few sickly yellow lights flickered in the vast, empty parking lot, barely piercing the gloom. No other cars, no distant chatter, just the skeletal outline of the bowling alley, its marquee dark, its windows like vacant eyes. And then I saw him. A lone figure, bathed in the sickly glow of one of those dying lights. Tall, maybe 6'2", wearing a plain gray hoodie pulled low and dark jeans. His hands were stuffed deep in his pockets, and his head was bowed as if studying the scuff marks on his shoes. I eased my car to a stop, the brake lights a fleeting crimson against the black. He looked up slowly, his face obscured by the shadow of his hood. No wave, no acknowledgement, just a slow, deliberate turn of his head. I rolled down the window, the night air carrying a faint, unsettling scent of damp earth and something metallic. "Derek?" My voice sounded too loud in the stillness. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod, then walked to the back door on the passenger side and slid in behind me. The silence in the car became a physical presence. I started the trip, the GPS voice a strangely comforting monotone, and asked if the destination was correct, an address 20 minutes away in a residential neighborhood I'd never heard of. "Yeah, that's right," he said, his voice a low, even murmur, completely devoid of inflection. It was flat, like a dead battery. Not drunk, not high, just flat. I remember the fleeting thought that it was unnerving, but the late hour and the need for income pushed it aside. Just another strange passenger. For the first 5 or 6 minutes, the silence in the car was absolute. No fidgeting, no phone screens, just the hum of the tires on the asphalt and the low thrum of my own heartbeat. Every now and then, I'd glance at him in the rearview mirror, and every single time, he was staring straight ahead. Not out the window, not at his phone, but directly at the back of my head. His eyes, even shadowed by the hood, felt like 2 dark, heavy weights pressing against my skull. It wasn't a casual gaze. It was unnervingly fixed. I tried to break the growing tension. "How's your night going?" I asked, forcing a casualness I didn't feel.
He paused. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, before he finally spoke. Just needed to get out. His voice remained unnervingly calm. "Out of where?" I pressed, a cold knot forming in my stomach. "Doesn't matter." The conversation died, replaced by the relentless, palpable pressure of his silent observation. My neck began to prickle. We drove on, deeper into the night. About 15 minutes in, the destination loomed closer. The GPS directed me off the main roads into an isolated part of town. No streetlights here, just sprawling, unkempt yards, overgrown with shadows and ancient trees whose branches clawed at the moonless sky. The houses were few and far between, ghostly outlines against the darkness. This wasn't a neighborhood. It felt like the edge of the world. As we approached the exact address, he suddenly leaned forward, his reflection in the mirror appearing unnervingly close, and said, "Actually, can you pull into that driveway right there?" He pointed to a house on the right. My headlights cut through the gloom, revealing a decaying structure. It was utterly dark, no lights anywhere, inside or out. It looked less like a home and more like a forgotten tomb. The lawn was a tangled mess of weeds, the paint on the siding peeling in grotesque strips, like skin flaking from a corpse. There was no car in the driveway, no sign of life. "Is this your place?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer. "Just pull in," he repeated, his voice flat, insistent. I hesitated, my gut screaming at me to floor it and get out. But the car was already turning. I pulled into the gravel driveway, the tires crunching loudly in the dead silence. I stopped near the dilapidated porch and put the car in park. He didn't move. I looked back at him, my heart thudding. "Everything all right?" I asked, my voice tight. His gaze was fixed on the dark front door, as if waiting for a specter to appear. "Wait here." And then he opened the door, a soft click that echoed too loudly, and got out. He didn't go to the front door. Instead, he walked around the side of the house, his silhouette swallowed by the deeper shadows, disappearing from my sight. I sat there frozen for what felt like an eternity, probably only 2 agonizing minutes. Every shadow seemed to writhe, every rustle of leaves a potential approach. The ride was still technically running on the app, a flimsy excuse. I didn't want a penalty, but a far more primal fear was gripping me. My gut, a cold, clenching fist, told me this wasn't just a quick stop. This was something deeply, profoundly wrong. Finally, the urge to flee became unbearable. I manually ended the trip, marking it as complete. My hand trembled as I reached for the gear shift. But before I could even shift into reverse, I saw him. He was walking back towards the car, not running, but moving with an unnerving speed, a glide that was almost predatory. His hands were empty, and his face, now caught in the faint glow of my dashboard, held an expression that made my blood run cold, a terrifying blend of cold rage and twisted amusement. My fingers, almost instinctively, unlocked the doors. I didn't want a confrontation, but every fiber of my being screamed not to let him back in. He opened the rear door, slid in, and his voice, still flat but with an edge of chilling demand, said, "Take me to the other place." "What other place?" My voice was hoarse. "Just drive. I'll tell you." "You need to put it in the app," I insisted, trying to sound professional, but my hands were slick with sweat on the wheel. He didn't answer. He just stared at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes black holes absorbing all light. "I can't take you anywhere unless you put it in the app," I repeated, my voice rising slightly. No response. After a few seconds, he simply told me to drive back to where he picked me up, the bowling alley. I didn't want to argue anymore. My throat was dry, my mind racing, so I started heading back. The entire drive back was an exercise in terror. The pressure in the car was suffocating. He wasn't speaking, but I could feel his gaze, a constant weight on the back of my head. The hairs on my arms stood on end, prickling with dread. At one point, I tried to lighten the mood, a desperate attempt to break the spell. Rough night? I ventured, my voice thin. You could say that, he replied, a hint of something dark in his flat tone. Everything all right? I asked. Not yet, he said. I didn't ask any more questions. The air vibrated with unspoken threat. When we finally got back to the strip mall, I parked under the same dim light where I'd picked him up, the same desolate quiet. But before I could say anything, he leaned forward, his face eerily close to mine in the rearview mirror, and asked, "You ever wonder how you're gonna die?" I froze. I let out a choked, awkward laugh. "Not really something I think about," I mumbled. He didn't laugh. He just leaned back in his seat, his gaze unwavering. After a few seconds, he said, "I think about it all the time." Then he opened the door and got out, without another word. He didn't close the door immediately. He just stood there, half out of the car, a chilling tableau against the dark. Then he looked at me, his eyes now seeming to glitter in the faint light, and said, his voice a low, chilling whisper, "You picked the wrong guy up tonight." He shut the door with a soft click that resonated through my bones and walked off, disappearing into the utter blackness behind the bowling alley. I sat there for a minute, maybe more, too shaken to move, the phantom weight of his gaze still on me. Eventually, I drove home, constantly checking my mirrors, every shadow a potential return. Once home, I was a wreck. I opened the Uber app, my hands shaking, to review the trip details. And that's when the real horror began. The name had changed. It no longer said Derek. It was blank. No name, no profile picture, no trip history. It was as if the ride never happened, as if he never existed. I contacted Uber support, desperate for an explanation, but they told me the trip data was unavailable. Sometimes that happens if the app crashes or if the rider cancels midway. But I know what I saw. I know I completed the trip. I know that man got in and out of my car, and I know he said what he said. "You picked the wrong guy up tonight." I've never seen him again, and I pray I never do. But every time I get a ping in a dimly lit parking lot or have a passenger who sits in unnerving silence in the back seat, I remember that night, and I remember that cold, creeping feeling that something terrible could have happened. That maybe he changed his mind at the last second, or perhaps he was never planning to do anything, just wanted to scare someone. But I still wonder what he meant, and if he ever found the right car.
It was 2021, and I was driving for Uber full-time. My city, a bustling summer destination, teemed with tourists, making rideshare gigs a decent way to stay afloat. I preferred the night shifts, the traffic was lighter, and the tips from a cheerful, if somewhat inebriated crowd returning from the bars were usually better. This particular Saturday night, around 1:30 a.m., was no exception. I just dropped off a particularly boisterous group of college kids, their drunken chants still echoing in my ears, so I welcomed the notification for a seemingly quieter request. The name displayed was Chris. The pickup location, a small side street just off the vibrant downtown core. But as I navigated the familiar streets, the GPS led me to an odd spot, not near any of the usual bars or apartment complexes, but rather near the desolate backlot of an old, crumbling strip mall, the kind of place where streetlights were broken and shadows clung heavily to every corner. A bad GPS marker, I told myself, a common glitch. I pulled up, my headlights cutting through the inky blackness, to find a lone figure standing at the corner. Hood up, jeans on, staring down at his phone, almost camouflaged against the dark. I eased to a stop and called out, "Chris?" He gave a curt nod and slid into the back seat without a word. No smell of alcohol, no slurred speech. He seemed sober, just unnervingly quiet. He didn't greet me, nor did he respond when I attempted a polite, "How's your night going?" Some people just aren't talkers, I reasoned, trying to dismiss the prickle of unease that had already started. I initiated the ride. The drop-off was on the opposite side of town, a 25-minute drive to a suburban neighborhood I'd visited only once or twice before. The thing is, it was pitch black out there, like truly isolated, with long stretches of road where no streetlights dared to venture and houses swallowed by overgrown trees. About 5 minutes into the trip, I noticed Chris had his phone out. But he wasn't texting or scrolling, he was holding it flat in his lap, the flashlight on, shining a low, steady beam upward slightly toward my seat. The faint glow danced in my rearview mirror, a disturbing, constant presence. It wasn't aimed at anything specific, just broadly pointed at the back of my head. I tried to make light of it, half joking, "Everything all right back there?" He simply mumbled, "Yeah." And then, with a click, the flashlight went dark. The next 20 minutes were utterly silent. Just the low hum of the engine, the whisper of the tires on the lonely road, and a palpable, unsettling tension building in the car. I can't quite describe it. Something about this guy just felt off. Not overtly threatening, but deeply unsettling. It was as if he wasn't fully present, his essence diffused, leaving only a shell behind. We finally reached the neighborhood. I followed the GPS to the house, but as we pulled up, I noticed it was completely dark. No porch light, no inside lights, nothing. It was swallowed by the night, a gaping maw of blackness. "Is this the right place?" I asked, my voice sounding strangely loud in the quiet. Chris didn't answer. He just sat there, a still, silent figure. I turned around to look at him, a shiver running down my spine. "Hey, is this it?" I repeated, a little louder, my voice laced with a newfound urgency. He stared past me, out the window, at the impenetrable darkness of the house. I repeated myself one more time, and finally he gave a slow, deliberate nod. So I put the car in park and, trying to sound normal, said, "Have a good night." He didn't move. He just sat there, a still, silent figure. "Are you good?" I asked again, my patience wearing thin, the unease tightening its grip. He finally reached for the door handle and stepped out, but he didn't close the door. He just stood outside the car with the door open, facing the house. I sat there, waiting. A few seconds passed, then 20, then a full minute. The cold night air seeped into the car through the open door. I was just about to say something, to demand he close the door, when he suddenly turned around, his face illuminated by the distant streetlights, looked at me through the open door and said, "I need to go back."
My heart jumped. I blinked. "Back where?" I asked. "Where you picked me up." His tone was flat, utterly devoid of emotion, yet there was an underlying desperation that was unnerving. I didn't know what to say. That was a 25-minute drive, and it wasn't like I could just reverse the trip. I told him he'd have to request a new ride, but he just stared at me, his eyes wide and dark. He began to beg, his voice still flat, but with a strange guttural urgency. "Please, I need to go back." I told him again, "You need to request it through the app." That's when he said something that sent chills up my spine, a whisper that seemed to come from another world. "I can't. They're not gone yet." My only response could be, "Who's not gone?" He didn't answer. He just stood there, still holding the door open, and I noticed he was breathing heavily, a ragged, desperate sound in the quiet night. At that point, I started getting seriously uncomfortable. This wasn't just a quiet guy. This was something else entirely. "Look, I can't just start a new ride unless you request it." He stared for another second, then slowly backed away and with a soft click, closed the door. He walked toward the house, a dark silhouette against the deeper black, even though it was pitch black and looked undeniably empty. I waited until he reached the porch before I finally pulled off, my tires spitting gravel. The moment I turned the corner, I ended the trip in the app, my thumb shaking, and started heading back toward downtown, desperate to leave that place behind. A couple of blocks down, the city lights began to reappear, a comforting glow.
I pulled into a 24-hour gas station, needing to use the bathroom and grab a drink to calm my nerves. I parked at the side of the building between two brightly lit pumps, went inside, and came back out maybe 4 minutes later. The fluorescent lights of the gas station seemed too bright, too normal. And when I got back to my car, my brain short-circuited. Chris was sitting in the back seat. The same hoodie, the same vacant expression. I thought I had locked the doors before going inside, a habit born of years driving at night. But somehow, inexplicably, he was in the back of the car. My breath hitched. I opened the driver's side door and slowly, cautiously stepped back in, keeping my eye on him through the rearview mirror. "How did you get back in?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He just said, "Take me back." "I'm calling the cops," I said, my hand instinctively reaching for my phone. That's when he leaned forward, so close I could hear his ragged breath against my neck, and whispered, "They're still in the house."
I don't know why, but I didn't call the police. Something about the way he said that, the absolute conviction in his voice, made me feel like he was trapped in some private nightmare, something the police couldn't simply fix. It wasn't just a weird passenger anymore. It was a desperate, perhaps delusional plea. I played along, my mind scrambling. "Whose house is that?" I asked. "My parents'," he replied. I asked him if he lived there. "Not anymore," he said. And that made the hair stand up on my neck, a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. I started slowly driving back to where I picked him up. Every part of me screamed not to do it, to speed away, to get help, but I didn't know what else to do. It was a bizarre, terrifying loop. As we got closer, his breathing grew heavier, more frantic. He was rocking slightly in the back seat, a low, guttural moan escaping his lips. At one point he whispered, "They're still there. They won't leave, no matter what I do." His words were filled with a raw, agonizing despair. When we pulled up to the house, it was still pitch black. Still no lights, no signs of anyone living there. Just the same empty shell. He got out without saying anything else, his movements almost sluggish, and then walked up to the front door. He didn't knock, didn't try the handle. He just stood there, still, facing the darkness, like a sentry for something unseen. I waited, perhaps 30 seconds, my eyes glued to him, then pulled away again, making damn sure the doors were locked this time. I drove 3 blocks, parked under a streetlight, and sat there for 10 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. My hands were shaking so violently, I could barely grip the wheel. I debated calling the cops, but what would I even say? That a guy got into my car twice and said weird things? There was no crime, technically, as far as I knew, so I just drove home and didn't sleep that night. The next day, I reported the ride to Uber, and honestly, I regretted not reporting this to the police, because the man might have been sick in the head, needing help, or something far worse. Who knows if that house was even really his parents' house, or if he actually was just having a manic episode. The chilling implication of "they're still in the house" continues to haunt me.
I'm an 18-year-old girl, and I live alone in my apartment, with only my tiny 5-pound Morkie Gus for company. My building is about 8 miles outside the main part of town, nestled on the edge of a large, open field, often used for parking trailers and letting dogs run wild. Getting food delivered can be a hassle sometimes. Most places charge extra or simply refuse to come out this far. I never thought anything bad would happen with Uber Eats. You hear stories, of course, urban legends whispered online, but you never truly believe they'll happen to you. At least that's what I told myself. It was a Friday evening. The air outside was damp from a recent rain, clinging to everything. I was busy cleaning my apartment, a flurry of motion, getting ready for my boyfriend to come over. He's long distance, so I only get to see him on weekends. I always try to have everything spotless before he arrives on Saturday morning. I'd been cleaning for about 2 hours, the scent of lemon cleaner filling the air, and it was well past 6 p.m. My stomach growled, reminding me that even cleanliness couldn't stave off hunger. I didn't want to dirty any dishes, having just scrubbed them all and sanitized the kitchen counter until it gleamed. So the easy solution was takeout. I ordered my usual, something comforting and familiar, and within minutes got the notification, "Your driver is on the way, driving a white Honda Fit Sport." Being a young girl living alone, I had my delivery instructions set to leave at door for contactless delivery. It was a small safety measure, a way to maintain a comfortable distance. I settled back into my living room, the soft glow of the TV flickering, waiting for the notification that my food had arrived. As soon as it popped up, I practically leapt from the couch, my stomach grumbling in anticipation. I opened my door, my hand already reaching for the promised bag of food, but it wasn't there. My heart sank. Maybe he left it at the wrong door, I thought, quickly scanning the other apartment doors on my floor. Nothing. A cold wave of annoyance washed over me. I stepped back inside, my phone in hand, ready to message the driver when I heard a soft, insistent knock at my door. My heart jumped. It wasn't the delivery driver, it was my next-door neighbor, Mr. Henderson, a kind, elderly man who always kept an eye out for me. He was holding my food. "Hey, sorry," he began, his voice a little strained. "I picked up your food from your delivery driver because, well, he was looking through your windows, and I wasn't sure what he was doing." My blood ran cold. I took the food, my hands trembling slightly as I thanked him, a chilling question forming in my mind. What the hell just happened? I went back inside, the warmth of the food doing little to dispel the sudden chill that had settled in my apartment. I tried to push it out of my mind, ate my dinner, and tried to enjoy a movie, but the image of a strange man peering into my windows kept replaying. Later, as I started to get ready for bed, the unsettling feeling intensified. I took a shower, the hot water doing little to soothe my nerves. Then, as I went to turn off my TV, I methodically checked all my doors, pulling on the handles, making sure every lock was engaged. A routine that now felt vital. I lay down in bed, called my boyfriend for our nightly chat, and eventually the exhaustion of the day pulled me into a fitful sleep. I woke up a few times during the night. Each time, it was Gus, my little Morkie, growling low and fiercely at the window or at the back door. Gus isn't a huge, scary dog. He's barely 5 pounds of fluff and fury, but it's still pretty terrifying when he growls at something unseen, catching you off guard in the dark. I'd calm him down, whispering reassurances, eventually getting him to settle back to sleep, but the unease lingered.
It wasn't even 15 minutes after I'd finally coaxed Gus back to sleep that I woke up again, this time to a loud, insistent banging on my bedroom window. My heart leaped into my throat. Gus went absolutely crazy, barking furiously, growling, and even whimpering, a sound I'd never heard from him before. I couldn't move. I was frozen in my bed, paralyzed by fear. I grabbed my bed sheets, pulling them over my head, leaving just enough space to peek out and see the window. The banging continued, sporadic but heavy, like a fist hitting the glass. I fumbled for my phone under the covers, my fingers clumsy with terror, and called the police. I whispered into the receiver, my voice thin and reedy. I explained to the operator that someone was in my backyard, trying to get in, and that my window didn't lock properly. It could easily be lifted. She told me to go to a different room, and that police would be at my apartment shortly. I scrambled out of bed, Gus whimpering at my heels, and ran to my kitchen, grabbing the largest knife I could find from the block. I stood there, trembling, clutching the cold steel,
waiting to see blue and red lights, to hear the blessed sound of sirens. It felt like forever. I looked out the window of my kitchen, which overlooked a large field beside my building, and I never expected to see what I saw. The Uber driver's white Honda Fit Sport. His car was sitting across the street from my apartment, parked in that very field, silhouetted against the dim glow of the distant city lights. The field was mostly empty at night, used for parking trailers and letting dogs play during the day. He was parked there, but I didn't see anyone in the car. It clicked then. My mind put two and two together with horrifying clarity. He's in my backyard. The police finally arrived, their flashing lights painting the walls of my apartment in alternating hues of red and blue. I could barely speak. I was shaking and crying, barely coherent. I explained to one officer what had happened, while the other immediately went to check my backyard, where my bedroom window was. Another officer who arrived went to check the driver's car, which was still in the field. He returned, shaking his head. No one was in his car. The two officers came back and started talking to the officer I was speaking with, their voices low and serious. "There are footprints in her backyard," one of them said. "It had just rained the night before, so the ground was very muddy." I started panicking, not just because that's not what you want to hear, but also because where was this guy? If he wasn't arrested with the cops and wasn't in his car, then where on earth had he gone? My neighbor, Mr. Henderson, came outside to see what all the commotion was about. The officers explained what was happening. He then spoke about how he had picked up my food for me earlier that day, mentioning the driver's strange behavior. Mr. Henderson, bless his kind heart, invited me to sleep over at his apartment for the night if it made me feel any better. Oddly, I passed on the offer. A strange sense of exhaustion, of needing to face it alone in my own space, overcame me. When all the cops left and the silence of the night returned, I went back into my apartment, thinking it was all over. It took me a few hours to get comfortable enough to finally fall asleep, the knife still clutched under my pillow. But at 2 a.m., I woke up again, this time to a frantic banging on my front door and a distant shout, "Police, open up!" My heart plummeted to my stomach. No way this is happening right now, I thought to myself. I scrambled up and went to my front door, terrified to open it. It was the woman officer I spoke to earlier. She explained they had stayed at my apartment, hidden, watching for that guy in case he showed back up. And he did. They caught him walking up to my front door, clearly trying to find a way in. My heart fell to my stomach when I heard her say that. She then explained he was arrested and I didn't have to worry about him anymore. I thanked her, my voice still trembling, and went back to try and sleep. Unfortunately, I couldn't fall asleep this time. The image of him, lurking in my backyard, then trying my front door, burned in my mind. I also don't use Uber Eats anymore when I'm home alone. Gus still growls at the window sometimes, even when there's nothing there. And I wonder if he senses a lingering presence, a shadow that never quite left.